Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Seventh Man podcast. We have a name now, so that's pretty cool. I'm Will Beverina, and I run Dimer2K.com and write about the NBA 2K League.
And I'm Josiah Khan. I also coincidentally read about the NBA 2K League, only for Operation Sports and for TSN.ca.
So we're back for episode 2. If you want to check out episode 1, you can find it on the channel here on YouTube. We talked about week 5 and previewed week 6, along with some other things. We want to thank everyone who listened to the first episode, and if you're back for the second episode, thank you very much. All of the support, no matter how big or small, is always appreciated. For today, though, why don't we talk about week 6? This was a great week of NBA 2K League action, and honestly, I really wish we had the time to talk about every single game in depth. But if we did, Josiah and I would be here talking about it for hours. So why don't we just discuss a few of these, and then we'll do a sort of quick fire round for the rest. Starting out, we got Magic Gaming versus 76ers Gaming Club. Magic Gaming, they took a loss last week in the regular season, but pretty hot for the most part. Came into it 3-3. 76ers Gaming Club, obviously they're the 76ers. We all know what they're all about. This was a close one in the first quarter, and then the 76ers just ran away with it. Final score 87-47, a 40-point loss for Magic Gaming. Josiah, what'd you think of this game?
I think the expression I would use for this one is absolutely blowing the doors off Magic Gaming in this one. 76ers, they struggled a little bit in the first quarter, as I think we've actually seen some of the top teams do, or perhaps it's the inverse. The worst teams are better in the first quarter and then they start to struggle. But then we just saw an absolute torching by 76ers GC. I think they finished on a 65-25 run after the early going, and once 76ers GC started getting out in transition, the game was never really in doubt.
Yeah, this was I mean, it was a blowout, plain and simple. That mostly because the Magic Gaming defense was just atrocious on all fronts, both on ball, off ball. Their rotations were off. The transition D was awful. Dirk even made some joke about it real late in the fourth quarter when Nudini, who was open just all game, got open again in transition, and Dirk feigned being really surprised by that. But the Magic have had those problems for a while now. Big lineup change for them, though. They moved Control to shooting guard, put him on the shot creating slasher build, which was really interesting to me. We talked about this on Twitter, but I don't actually mind them trying that build. I just don't think they should have done it against a good team like the 76ers.
I did disagree with you on this one because I think might as well try it out. I think what we agreed on was that control really needs to take control of the offense at times per se. They've been running it through their big men and through King Cam royalty, who is really a phenomenal insertion into the lineup. But I think that if you've got something that's working, then that's something maybe you can deploy in games that you have a good chance, or actually any chance at all, of winning. If you're playing a worse team as they have played, those are the wins you really want to pick up. And if you've got a tried and true formula, you use that in those must-win games. And here, in a game where you're probably not going to win, you try something out, see if you strike gold, and at the same time, give other teams in those must-win games something to think about. Which lineup are they going to bring out? Are they going to bring out the lineup that worked, or do they have this new lineup that, all right, yeah, it didn't work so well against a great team, but we can't exactly style ourselves as a great team. Might they try it again against us?
That's a fine argument, in all honesty. I understand where you're coming from, but they've played the Magic have played such great team ball. Like they're such a balanced offense, and that's how they've been winning the past few weeks, that I felt that's still their best shot at beating a really good team. But obviously this week it didn't work. Talking about that shot creating slashing build that Control was on at shooting guard, Dirk mentioned during the broadcast that he'd asked players in the league before, why weren't people trying that build? And players apparently told him that it actually didn't dunk enough. And we saw that once actually during the game where Control, he had a clear lane to the basket and his player went up for a layup and it was off because it was contested. So maybe not the best build overall, especially to try it against a really good team like the 76ers, but there were other problems here. Like I mentioned the defense before. The Magic almost went 6 entire minutes without scoring a single point. Okay, they scored their 22nd point of the game with 3:12 left in the second quarter. They didn't score again until 3:52 in the third quarter. That's almost an entire quarter of NBA 2K League basketball where you don't score a point. So, like I said, other issues besides just the lineup change and to, the real I guess salt in the wound was Steez yelling to put Control back at point guard at the Magic Gaming team.
Yeah, it was an absolute thrashing. Magic Gaming shot well below 50%, and you have no chance to win if you shoot below 50%. King Cam went 1 for 6. Only Marley, I think, shot anything above 50%. Should you know what? I agree with Steve that putting Control back at the point, you know, I don't think you can argue for changing up the builds and also argue for change. I don't know where I'm going with this argument, but I think if you have that consistent lineup, as you said, you want to stick with it. I like Control at point guard because I thought he needed to step up more, and I think you know at times you do have to just step up. Radiant steps up, Fab steps up, and I'm very much an advocate for the point guard playing, on ball defense against the opposing point guard. Some teams, Jazz come to mind because they have Tiffy, who's such a great defender, and when he plays on a shooting guard. But yeah, I'd agree with Steez on that one. I think Magic Gaming, the best thing they could do, is sort of not watch too much film on this one, really prepare better for next week and just put this one in the rearview mirror because there aren't a lot of bright spots to look at.
Yep, very ugly game for the Magic. Moving on to the game that last week I said I was really looking forward to. Knicks Gaming versus Heat Check Gaming. This was a close one from start to finish. Heat Check got it out in the end, 75-74 over Knicks Gaming. Heat Check went to 3-3 after winning this one. The Knicks went to 2-5. So this was a really important game. Like I said, talking about playoff chances, and I mean at 2-5 halfway through the season, only having 2 wins, that's a tough one. Give me your thoughts on this game, Josiah.
I mean, famous made the right move. He got Hyper in a spot that eventually got him the win. Hotshot, who I've been so high on all season, continued to impress, scoring 32 points or something. And Adams still the shot isn't quite falling as much as you would like from a point guard. Look, this was a great game. I'm not sure it was the game of the season, and I think the game of the season will no doubt is no doubt still to come. But yeah, this one really stings for the Knicks. Trying to get back, and this makes the week more palatable for the Heat in that they lost big time later on. But you escape with the 1-1 split in the doubleheader. We know how deadly doubleheaders have been for teams this year. Especially the Raptors come to mind. But man, the Knicks are slipping. I thought they were going to be a better team than their record indicates. They might well be a better team than their record indicates, but there's just something that you know they're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. They're fitting the round peg into the round hole, but they're not just getting it down all the way. To use a very unnecessarily convoluted metaphor.
Yeah, I mean the Knicks, like this team is better than its record says. They're just, they're losing to teams they shouldn't be losing to. Probably. We talked about last week. They've already given two different teams their first wins of the season, Magic Gaming and Pacers Gaming. And so now you can't beat the teams near the bottom, and now you can't beat the teams around you. So that's not a good playoff formula. But talking about Heat Check, famous enough doing a little bit of tinkering here, moving Hyper's Pro down to center and drop off onto the pure sharpshooter at small forward, benching sharpshooter Los, which is a bit of a surprise to me because he's pretty accurate from three. But you talked about Hot Shot getting 32 points. what they were doing actually was running a hot shot ISO and with a little bit of motion. And a lot of times, what they were doing was I can't quite remember who they were sending, but they were sending some cutters to the basket from the top of the key, and they're also mixing that in with some Majestic and hot shot pick and roll. And Majestic, you have to point out, having a great game, 4 or 6 from 3-point land. Not the best shooting performance overall, but hitting those threes was obviously crucial, especially when you compare his 3-point shooting performance to his counterpart Adam, only going 3 of 8 from three. But the Knicks just couldn't stop what Heat Check was doing with Hot Shot, whether Hot Shot was on the ISO or they were doing the Majestic and Hot Shot pick and roll. Idris the GOAT, he was on the pure rim protector at center, usually known as being a lockdown kind of guy. He had a real tough time dealing with Hot Shot. Hot Shot, 13 of 17 from the field, 32 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, which is some pretty good numbers. That's probably maybe the single best performance of the week. And we talked about last week how the big men for the Knicks Gaming disappointed a bit. Another kind of disappointing performance. Idris the GOAT going 7 for 14, 18 points. Goofy didn't do too bad, 23 and 8, but it's just not enough, and they needed just a little bit more from I guess everyone, to be quite honest with you, and it just wasn't there. Maybe they got a bit unlucky, but you got to find a way to win these games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to my unabashed praising of Hotshot, the rich man's Al Horford, as it were. Part of what drew that pure rim outside, and I think opened him up a little bit to the drives. That Hotshot was able to so successfully escalate. It's just those high pick and rolls that you mentioned with Majestic. I haven't been totally sold on Majestic all year, but I think this is another great game. Any game for me where a point guard can really limit the turnovers is a great one. And he only had one in this one. Shot well from beyond the arc, which, as you said, Adam did not. Hot shot, just did so well as he always does. And the Knicks, didn't shoot well as a team. The guy who shot well was Not Gaming, 5 of 6, including 1 of 1 from three. Maybe you want to get the ball to him more. But I think the Knicks, they have a lot of mouths to feed. And, sometimes you try and feed the mouths that clamor the loudest, rather than the mouths that might be most advantageous to feed. I'm really working the metaphors today, but I think that's probably a little bit of what's happening. The Knicks, you mentioned earlier, they failed to beat the teams below them, and they failed to beat teams around them. Well, yeah, there are only teams around them now. That there's no one really below them. Only one team has a worse record, and that's Warriors Gaming Squad, whom the Knicks have actually beaten a couple times. But yeah, it's tough. You want to see the New York team pull it together, especially with all their home court advantage, as it were, home field advantage. But it's tough to see them lose, and in this fashion, such an exuberant, exhilarating win for the Heat. Hyper, who's been pretty overlooked this season, gets that last second bucket. Just a top notch win for them, and another week of frustration for the Knicks.
All right, moving on. A surprisingly close game between Blazer 5 Gaming and Warriors Gaming Squad. Two teams on the polar ends of the standings here. 64-61, Blazer 5 barely squeaking this one out, but I'm going to be honest with you right now. They maybe didn't deserve to win this one, Josiah.
Well, look, they maybe didn't deserve to win it. You can't tell me the Warriors deserved it too much at the end either. I'm going to say one good thing. And then I'll turn it over to you before I start yelling. Good things happen to last place teams who lose by 3 points in a tough one to Blazer 5. Raptors did it. They had a heartbreaking 69-66 overtime loss to Blazer 5, and then lost to them again in the turn. But then they went on in the last 2 weeks. They've picked up 2 wins. I can see them winning again next week. So let's just say that Warriors are hoping for that sort of turnaround. But well, cut me off before I start yelling here.
I mean, I was impressed with how the Warriors played. If we, cut off like the last, just cut off that entire fourth quarter. The first 3 quarters were extremely impressive to me. holding Blazer 5 to only 64 points at all is a feat in itself. This was a team that averaged over 80 points a game during the entire tournament. So give credit to them for that, but the execution, the late game execution was so incredibly awful. They couldn't hit any single shot. If you look at the box score, overall, they shot pretty horrendously. Uh, Vert having a great game. Can't include him in any of this criticism, honestly. 17 points, 16 rebounds. He went 7 for 11, but going through the rest of the lineup, like a pro, 5 for 10. Type, 3 for 12. Beast Move, 5 for 10. Sean Wynn, 4 for 11. If and they just had tons of opportunities to run away with this in the fourth quarter, and they just couldn't. They couldn't capitalize. They scored 11 points total in the fourth quarter, which isn't gonna do it. And it's such a shame to waste such a great effort on defense. Beast Move was on Mama, I'm That Man, and kind of held him to, Mama ended up with 25 and 9, but Beast Move in the first half, he shut down Mama. Mama was only 3 for 8 after the first half, and the Warriors gaming defense and the rotations, mostly impressive. Had a couple small mistakes that led to some Blazer 5 transition points, but I mean, it's I don't know what you're gonna say. I was mostly impressed with Warriors gaming, but just couldn't capitalize.
Okay, here we go. All right, yes, I agree. Defense was on point. They were fired up. Credit especially Type was super fired up on defense. It's so hard to play a near perfect game of defense against Blazer 5. You're not going to play a perfect game of defense against them. They're just too good. But here is where you can be better. There are things you can do better. One of those things is to limit your turnovers. You cannot turn the ball over 15 times against Blazer 5 Gaming and expect to walk away with a win. That is a thing you cannot do. You cannot keep defaulting to the same play on offense late in crunch time when Blazer 5 has held you so well in this quarter as they did. Consistent high pick and roll with Vert set. Him being not even in that first pick and roll. It's like who is a good point guard. I will say that. Like getting the screen from Type going around, and it just stands out, especially on the last play. That's their first action. They've got Beast Move off in the corner, and then they've got Vert setting an off-ball screen. Off-ball screens, a great addition to the league. I wonder who's been advocating for that all season long. And then like it drives to the hoop. Seems like Walnut is actually leaving the paint to chase after Vert. Like a pro kicks it out to Sean Wynn, who shot 4 for 11 in yet another underwhelming performance. Kicks it out to him as he's coming around. All the credit in the world to Grant. Makes the read on play that is not new to him if he's been watching the game, which he has been. He makes a nice block on the Sean Wynn fade. And look, I'm not gonna say that I expected the Warriors to come out with the win. I'm not gonna say even when they went up, I expected them to come out with the win. But at a point, you're just tearing your hair out when they throw the ball away on 2, 3, 4 possessions late in the fourth quarter when they got a chance to do it and be the team to stop the undefeated Blazer 5 Gaming. They had a chance. They coughed it up, quite literally, and it's disappointing. Dominance is good for the league and it's good for a storyline, but you don't care about the storyline if you're a Warriors Gaming. You care about the fact that you had a great chance and you might not get that chance again.
I will note one thing. Vert, 16 rebounds, only one less than Walnut and shots combined in this game. Type, on the sharpshooting rim protector, had as many rebounds as Walnut. And we talked about rebounding having some sort of correlation to being a good team. The Warriors definitely out-rebounded Blazer 5, but, it's not a 100% correlation to winning, I suppose. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the Pistons. Did not have a very good week. Let's talk about their first game of Saturday. They played against Mavs Gaming. On paper, a pretty great matchup. Two teams who are up there in the standings. Pistons went to this one 4-1. Mavs Gaming were 4-2, and it was a blowout. An absolute blowout. 88-53, the final score of this one. And really, this game was over by the time the first quarter was over. I've never seen any team in this league so thoroughly dominate an opponent and impose their will on an opponent, both on the court and mentally. Dayfry and Haza and Dimes were so in the heads of the entire Pistons team, I couldn't believe what I was watching. This is a Pistons team that's as loud as they come, talks as much trash as any team in this league, and they were absolutely quiet by the end of the first quarter. Nothing out of them, not a single squeak. And I was shocked at what I was watching. And maybe it's not the biggest blowout the league has seen, like by points, but this was, if you factor in just the absolute defeated look on the entire team of the Pistons, this is probably the most embarrassing loss I've seen in this league. More embarrassing than whatever ungodly amount of points the Mavs beat the Grizz by in the tip-off tournament. Not too much to talk about here, in all honesty. Mostly everyone on the Mavs giving a great performance. Dimes 24 and 18. Dayfry got 23 points. JLB moved to the sharpshooter. He got 10 points of his own. Ball like Seam, 21 points on 8 for 10. And, the Pistons only managing 53 points. You can't do that if you can't hold the other team. We won't dwell on this one too much. Josiah, talk to me about the Pistons' other game later on Saturday. They lost to Pacers Gaming 67-63. What'd you see in this one?
I like this one. I like this game. I thought it was a good game overall. No team had their grip on it the entire time. It was back and forth, you know, with the Pacers, gaining the upper hand slowly and but surely, and walking away with what I thought was a deserved victory. You know, a lot of it I think was what I'm going to call a strength on strength matchup. Sometimes you try to exploit mismatches, but at other times you have to just put your strength against their strength and may the better man win, as it were. And we got some of this with the power forward matchup. Tucker locks up, and let's get it Ramo for the Pistons going head to head at power forward, and that in part really opened the door for Frosty the Truth going up against Rux across the way. Frosty near triple double. He was getting into it late. He was screaming. He was amped. He had a nice fast break dish to Tucker locks up. But one thing I think really helped the Pacers, just getting that new shot form for Gunnar. And the Pacers ran two sharps. They had an excellent game plan. I was talking a little earlier about how their use of the horn set, which they ran to great effect at times, and the Pistons eventually cordoned onto it. But it really serves as a good example of how they exploited certain mismatches while at the same time using their own strengths. I've always been a fan of Wolf at point guard. Thought he did yet another good job managing the game, dishing out the ball, spreading it around, and this is a Pacers team that looks like it has a new lease on life. They were dead in the water, 2 weeks ago, but all of a sudden they're back in it. They're hot. They're feeling good, which is arguably more important. They've got a new sixth man, and it might be too late to get back into playoff contention, but it also might not when you're playing like this. And they're playing out the top of their game now. They're thinking well. They're thinking well. They're not just playing well. They're thinking well, and they're thinking smart, and that's doing so much for them.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of things there. I'm gonna talk about something, I don't know, I guess it, it's a lot of different connections I made when watching both of the Pistons games. So one awesome thing they added to the production this week was the listen-ins during timeouts, which again, We praised the production team last week. Have to give them more praise again for that. But something I heard during this game between the Pistons and the Pacers was, let's get Ramo saying something to the effect of, "We're running this lineup for a reason, so let's play to those strengths." And what I think he meant by that was putting Ramo back at power forward and putting Rux at center. And I think something they anticipated was the Pacers putting Frosty the Truth, who was at center at pure rim protector, onto Ramo because Ramo's the bigger offensive threat. And that means Rux is going to be at center with a size advantage going up against Tucker Locks Up, who's on a non-defensive build at power forward. So I think that's what he meant by that. And he said something like, let's get it to Rux or something like that. I don't know exactly what he said. And sure enough, the Pacers put Frosty the Truth onto Ramo, and they tried to feed Rux to take advantage of that matchup. Well, if that is what they were doing, it didn't really work. Rux, he had 16 and 10, but he was 7 for 16 shooting, which is just not at all, I guess, acceptable when you're a big man in this league. And there was also something else I heard from both the Pacers and the Mavs. First, against the Mavs, Jonah Edwards, head coach of the Mavs Gaming, during one of the timeout listen-ins, said something like, "Splash King can't guard anyone. Splash King cannot guard us. Let's attack Splash King." Sure enough, ball like seam, Splash King's man had 21 points on 8 of 10 shooting. And Cody Parent, Pacers Gaming head coach, said something in this game during one of the listen-ins to the effect of, "Let's remember who we're trying to exploit." Now, he didn't outright say Splash King, but I can kind of assume, if one opponent has seen that kind of defensive weakness in your team, another guy like Cody Parent is also going to see that same kind of weakness. And when you're a team like the Pistons, who is the worst offense in the league scoring wise, and you depend so much on your defense to hold your opponent to like 50, 55 points, and you can't do that, you're going to lose games because your offense, the Pistons offense, can't keep up with anyone. Like the league average for points is somewhere around like 66, 67. The Pistons get nowhere near that most games. They've broken 70 in the regular season once, I think, maybe. And so when you can't defend, when two teams have potentially identified that kind of weakness in your defense that you really need, bad things are going to happen. And we saw bad things happen this week. Pistons are now 0-2. So or they're now 4-3, but they were 0-2 last week. So, that there were just some problems, man. There were just a lot of problems, and I really expect them to go back to Joseph the Truth at center, who's proven himself as a more than capable center, and putting Rux back at shooting guard.
Yeah, definitely Joseph has proven himself, and just one example to highlight your point about Splash. One of the horn sets I mentioned, the setup was Wolf bringing it up, Frosty and Tucker at the elbows, Vigunner off in the corner, on the pure sharp, so you can't sag off him, can't help off him, and they had Frosty dishing the ball from the elbow. And what they did was they had Tucker set the screen on Splash, with Swizzerk, also pure sharp, coming across to the top of the arc. So ideally, you would have, and the Pistons figured it out late in the game, and Rux did a good job helping off his man, off the screen setter into the corner. But what really torched, and I think Wolf was so wide open. I've rarely seen a player so open for a basket, is that Splash just didn't read the necessary switch. And so he was still chasing Swizzerk. I'm so far ahead, was so far behind his man. And, Wolf got wide open in the corner. Frosty hit him with the nice dish for an easy jump shot. And that's definitely one thing that stands out to me, that supports your point. And I might be a little worried about the Pistons. That they've proven themselves enough that you don't have to sound the alarms quite yet. But doubleheaders are a big problem for some teams, not all teams, but for some teams. and I think they'll be happy to move on to next week and get away from it. Though, you know, they're coming up against a team who knows all about the bad effects of doubleheaders in Raptors Uprising.
Well, I was gonna ask you, but you touched on it a bit. Should the Pistons be worried? I mean, they're still 4-3, which is pretty good record at this point. They're still in a playoff spot. What do you think?
I think they've earned themselves enough credit to not be worried quite yet, but they should be worried if they think they're going to be worried. And what I mean by that is if, they start letting this loss get into their head, if they think, oh my goodness, we just lost to, not only did we get absolutely blown out by a team we probably thought we could handle, but we also lost to a team that did not have a regular season win until last week. If they start thinking about that, then they're going to be in trouble, and then they do have to sound the alarm. But they step back, settle down, give themselves some credit, and just really prepare hard for the next week. Nothing cures worrying like winning. So that should be the priority, not reassessing at this point.
Yeah, I think they're fine. Make the lineup change. Work on, I don't know if this is a team that's capable of even being an average offense. We've seen now multiple times because they also got blown out by Wizards District a few weeks ago, something like 77-52.
Right, right.
So you need to, I don't know, man, like if you can just even be an average offense against this Pistons team, you have such a good chance of winning. So uh, they have some things to work on, but I think they're fine for the most part. Like I said, they're in good position to make the playoffs, and as long as you make the playoffs, all you have to do is make the right adjustments so that you can, no matter what position you're in, going into the playoffs, so that you can play the best game you can. All right, let's do like a rapid fire. Talk about the rest of the games just real quick, and just give me like a couple of bullet points on these games. Jazz Gaming 90, Celtics Crossover Gaming 83. What'd you think?
Big win for the Jazz. This is the matchup they lost in the turn tournament that got the Celtics all the way. That started the Celtics all the way on their way to $25,000, and the runner-up position heard them talking about how disappointing that loss was for them, and no better way to erase that memory than to go out and beat this team, especially scoring 90 points against them.
Yeah, Jazz Gaming, I mean, they look really good right now. I have them top three in my power rankings. Two wins against two quality opponents in the past 2 weeks, so good for them. Next up, Kingsguard Gaming 70, Bucks Gaming 79.
Kingsguard is just such a Jekyll and Hyde team. It's hard to remember at this point that they started the regular season 3-1. Haven't looked like that team since. They're really a Jekyll and Hyde team. They need to figure it out. They need to sit down. They need to, be composed. Continue talking. Communication, communication, communication. That's key.
Yeah, we talked about last week. Kingsguard, they look checked out, and same thing this week. They look checked out, but give credit to Bucks Gaming. They're now 3-4. They're in the playoff mix, I think, and low key, they might become they have the potential to become a really good 3-point shooting team. Next up, Wizards District Gaming 62, Raptors Uprising 68.
All hell Trey has been an absolute phenomenon at power forward, scoring 25, 26 points this game, and that just powered them enough to get the win. Kenny's been so improved. He didn't shoot well, but he cut down on the turnovers big time, which was a huge issue for him early in the season. Wizards tinkered with their lineup. Not sure it was so successful. I think, they over tinkered. I'm not sure that tinkering was the wrong idea, but I think they over tinkered in this case.
Completely agree about the Wizards over tinkering. No need to do that much movement. This is a team we're both high on, I know, and now they're 3-4, and they're gonna have to fight for a playoff position. Raptors Uprising, that move of all hail traded power forward has really sparked something for them, and at 3-5, they may be back in the playoff picture. The Celtics Crossover Gaming 87, Grizz Gaming 73.
Look, Fab is just too good. Fab is too good. He, Walnut's getting the shout outs for the MVP, and that's well deserved. But there's one offensive MVP in my mind. Fab is just so dominant. He's got all the counting stats. No one assists like Fab assists.
Yeah, that jump shot update, I think, benefited him more than anyone else in this league. He was such a poor shooter from three. Picked it up this week. Grizz Gaming made a lot of silly mistakes in this one. I think they should stick with the lineup and what they're doing right now, though. Cavs Legion 84, Heat Check Gaming 55.
Hood is back. Hood is back, and that is music to the ears of Cavs Legion, who, it must be said, did very, very well. Did admirably without him, but he's just such a scoring maven. He can get it done. You need to score points. That's an incontestable fact. And, they did blow out a team coming off an emotional win. And that's just such a good sign. They're in serious playoff position right now.
Yep, Hood 32 points. God of 2K had 30 points. Sick, moving to point guard, had 20 assists. Heat Check Gaming, they just seem like one of those teams who just really has a hard time against anyone above them. So, tough loss for them. Josiah, who's your most impressive team in week 6?
This is a good one. I might have to give it to the Pacers again. Got another big win, continuing the grind. They probably were feeling, we might be down and out at this point after starting 1-5, but they're right back in it. But you know, yeah, I think that would be the one. Though at the same time, I am gonna take this moment to just reiterate my admiration for 76ers GC's absolute explosion. They just turned the ignition switch and roared off into the distance far, far ahead of Magic Gaming. I think that's really impressive to me.
I'm gonna go with Cavs Legion in this one. We see lineup changes every week, and I don't know if we've seen a lineup change that worked as well as moving Hood to power forward and six to point guard. That's an almost 30-point win against a decent opponent in Heat Check Gaming. Josiah, tell me, who were you most disappointed with in week 6?
Oh, this one should be pretty obvious. It's the Pistons. 4-1 team should not be losing two straight games. Should not be losing in the fashion that they did. And you know, they were my most disappointing team. My most disappointing 2 minutes, obviously, came from Warriors Gaming Squad. They could have been somebody, could have been a contender, but just threw the ball away. It's tough to say, it's tough to hear, but it's true.
I'm gonna go with Magic Gaming in this one, just to get away from the obvious. Obviously, the Pistons were the most disappointing team, but getting away from them, I'm gonna go with Magic Gaming. 40-point loss. You are not entirely sold on the Magic, and you said they have some wins, but they weren't against two quality opponents, and this was kind of their chance to prove people like you wrong, and they laid down. So that's a tough loss to take for them.
Yep, they laid a goose egg. I keep saying it. Yeah, I'm not so high on them. Their wins, their regular season wins, came against the 15th, 16th, and 17th ranked teams in the league, and they got their win in the turn against Kingsguard, who just you don't know what's going to happen with Kingsguard on any given day, it seems. So yeah, that's my take on Magic.
All right, and let's look ahead to week 7. Josiah, give me one matchup you're really looking forward to in week 7.
I think the easy one is Blazer 5 against Celtics crossover. The Friday night cap. That's going to be a fireworks show, very different styles competing. But at the same time, I'm also really intrigued by the Saturday morning starter, which is Bucks Gaming against Pacers Gaming. Two teams that we've seen really dig themselves out of a huge hole and make a name. This one has playoff implications as well, because if the Pacers win, they could be right back in the hunt. If the Pacers lose, I think we can all but close the book on them. The Bucks have been hot lately. A win gets them back to 500, which is a very respectable place to be at the moment. Separates them a bit from the huge glut of 3-4 teams, and I think it's going to be a good game there.
I'm going to go with Pistons against the Raptors. That's the 4 p.m. game on Saturday. Two teams who are kind of on the, I guess, opposite ends of how they're trending. Pistons Gaming or Pistons GT taking two really bad losses. Raptors Uprising, they look pretty decent. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Raptors do against a quality opponent and whether they can claw their way back into the playoff picture. 4-5, they're not too far off from the playoffs. Pistons, meanwhile, at 4-4, they'd kind of be back in that kind of log jam in the middle, trying to fight for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I I think about the Raptors a lot because TSN.ca. That's where the coverage lies. A lot of Raptors uprising stuff in my articles there. I think they can do it. I think they can absolutely beat a team that's coming off two bad losses. The Raptors are feeling themselves. They're feeling good. They're looking good. They're living in an incredible house. Bell Five House is absolutely spectacular. I think they can do it. 4-5, as you say, is right back in it, and I think they're going to be there. I think the Pistons are a bit demoralized. I think they have the talent to do it, but the Raptors have done well against defense first teams and teams that can't really put up numbers on offense. So I think they can definitely do it.
All right. Well, that's all I had, Josiah. Do you have any more thoughts?
So many thoughts, but got to save something for the articles, as you know well.
Right. We don't want to take up too much of your time, so why don't we wrap this up? Josiah, tell the people where can they find you and all of your content.
You can find me two places: operationsports.com, and you can find me on tsn.ca. I do a few other things for them behind the scenes, but mostly you'll want to go to the esports hub there. Got some NBA 2K articles up, thoughts every week, and also a little bit about other esports. Had a nice little interview and discussion about the NHL Gaming World Championships that I think got a lot of that tournament. Was really good step for the NHL into the esports scene. But this podcast is hardly about that. So tsn.ca, Operation Sports, limit it to that.
Great. If you want to find me on Twitter, at Will Beverina, Beverina. I run Dimer2K.com and write about the NBA 2K League. If you want to follow Dimer2K, or if you want to follow Dimer, it's just Dimer. If you want to follow Dimer, at Dimer2K, and you can find I put out a couple articles a week and some other little bits of content. But if you listened all the way through to this podcast, thank you very much. Be sure to give us some feedback. We're learning every week. Like we said last week, this is something new for us. Just hit us up on Twitter and say, hey, you can do this a bit better or do something like this. Give us some feedback on the topics of discussion. If you want to see us, give us some questions you maybe want us to answer. Do any of that. We're open to it. Our feelings won't be hurt. That's it for today. Once again, thank you for listening. And if you want to check out episode 1, go do that. All right. Goodbye, everyone.